the older ones, because in Africa, it's age before beauty. Joining us this afternoon is a Pan-African of note, a brother of mine, Dr. Donald Kaberuka, the former finance minister of Rwanda, one of the most effective president of the African Development Bank, one of the Africans that we all turn to when we need to come up with a genuine development plan for countries in Africa. He is an envoy that African heads of states turn to when they want something to be done. He is also an envoy that our organization, the African Union, turns to when they want something to be done. I would really am pleased that he made time to join us this afternoon. I don't know where he's coming from because he moves all over the world. But thank you so much for joining us. And over to you, Dr. Kaberuka.
Thank you, Mujanku. Thank you for those kind words. It's good to see you. I've not seen you for quite a long time. I happen to be speaking from Kigali, Rwanda today.
Okay, so it is good afternoon.
Right. You are right that I move around the world quite a lot, but for this event, I'm doing it from here. I want to thank you and Dr. Chikane for getting us together, and also for colleagues from other parts of the world who have seen it necessary to join this incredible conversation. When I saw that part of the conversation I was going to have was about economic emancipation, my starting point was the following. Today, in the current global pandemic crisis, we have had two global crises in the last 12 years. And I want to share with you how Africa has fared in these two crises, to show to you how economic emancipation is a matter of life and death for all of us. So in the last 12 years of our two global crises, the first one in 2008 and 9, when the global financial markets went haywire. You know, the rest is history. It turns out, actually, that apart from the fact that our exports demand declined, Africa was not very much affected by that crisis, simply because our integration in the global markets is very small. Our share of global trade, global GDP, is less than 1.2% still. Even though our population in Africa is around 12%. Even though our natural resources, about 30% of the global total. And I suspect that with energy transition from fossil fuels to new forms of energy, that the role of Africa will become even more important. I suspect that because of our demographics, younger people, more people, those mega trends will count quite a lot. To give an example, between now and 2050, there'll be 2 billion more human beings on the planet, 2 billion. Half of them will be from Africa. Half of those will be from Africa. So our demographic trends will continue. I think our natural resources will play a bigger role, but it is up to us now to fight for being part and parcel of that process, a process which has been going for the last 50 years plus. But why do I mention the crisis today? I learned 4 things from this crisis which have relevance for our conversation. The first lesson, I refer to COVID-19. The world was so badly prepared, so badly prepared. It's almost like a train which crashed in a station. And the reason was not difficult to see. The reason is that pandemics are mainly seen to be a problem for poor countries, HIV/AIDS, malaria, tuberculosis. So the global architecture for pandemics was not fit for purpose when this particular crisis hit us. Second lesson, that in fact, the markets were able to provide a solution quickly, whether it is diagnostics, whether it is vaccines, whether it is therapeutics. However, those are not equitably available to all members of humanity. They are available to the rich countries, to the rich in the rich countries. Today, as wealthy countries vaccinate more than 60% of their people, many African countries are under 5% vaccination. I say 5%. And so it most likely that once the global north, as we call it, has vaccinated its people, the risk is that COVID-19 will become another endemic disease in the global south, like HIV/AIDS, like tuberculosis and malaria, left to development organizations, left to philanthropy. That is where we are. And I can't think of a conversation on emancipation which does not begin from where we are today, i.e. the fact that the world was badly prepared. Science and markets have a solution, but those solutions are not equitably available to all of us, even when we have money to buy it. Many African countries have struggled a lot to access vaccines, therapeutics, diagnostics, even when they had money to buy those things. You therefore not be surprised that as part of this economic emancipation, there's now a movement to say it can't continue. We now have to begin to think seriously about manufacturing vaccines, drugs, therapeutics, diagnostics, the kind of things we need in Africa. We simply can't go on depending on the global supply chains whose weaknesses we have seen. But what would it take for this global African economic emancipation? Now, many other panels will explore different aspects of this, but I would say 3 are critical. Number 1 is ability to craft our own policies. Policies fit for ourselves, as people in China have done, people in Southeast Asia, and many other places. Ability to craft our own policies, fit for ourselves, fit for our times. The ability to craft policies for our own countries, own people, has gone through a very long march. A very long march, which we don't have time to go through today. But our ability to be able to say, this is what we like to achieve, these are autonomously defined policies, is number 1. And that must be policies which are inclusive of members of our society. I think the second thing, which is critical, is our ability to work together, united, in a much more meaningful way, as a matter of agency. I don't have to go back to Kwame Nkrumah in the 60s, or to the forefathers of the Organization of African Unity, and how they defined that long march. We are now at a point, in Africa at least, of beginning that journey finally through the African continental free trade area. The free trade area is only the beginning, but it's a very important beginning. I hope we'll move on eventually to an African customs union, eventually an economic union, and even eventually a monetary union. Our ability to work together across the 55 countries is a step which is inescapable in our march towards emancipation. At the moment, in our balkanized ways, there are efforts at regional economic level, but that will have to end, as is happening in Europe, in many other places, when small, weak nations decide to come together to mutualize their efforts. I'm not saying that it is easy. I'm not saying it will happen tomorrow, but that is an essential part of economic emancipation. So number one, our ability to define and craft our own policies. It does not mean we don't learn from the rest of the world. We do, we have to. But at the end of the day, we define our own policies. And second, to work together as African countries in a more meaningful way. And thirdly, asserting Africa's voice in the world. It cannot be, as I've just mentioned, that, for example, if you go back to 1945 after World War II, the institutions which were created then, whether financial or the political, had first Bretton Woods institutions, but the United Nations, these organizations where Africa was a marginal player. Now, fast forward to the 1970s, during the global energy crisis, even those instruments showed their limitations. And the very wealthy countries called G7 or G8 came together to craft some solutions. Africa was nowhere to be seen, or many other countries in the global south. Now, fast forward to 2008, during the global financial crisis, even that particular architecture was no longer fit for purpose. It had to be expanded to the G20. In other words, countries who account for about 80% of global wealth. But that left out many nations, including African nations, including countries like Bangladesh, because economically our power is not, so to speak, to use their own lexicon, systemically important. We're lucky that a number of countries in the global south were participating in this machinery. South Africa, Brazil, India, Indonesia, I think Mexico, Brazil, and Chile and Argentina. I hope I have my numbers right. But really the rest of us were left out of this, thinking about the kind of world we want in the future. And therefore, I go back to what I was saying right now. The only way to fight for our voice in the world is, once we have been able to define our own policies, to figure out how to work together in a meaningful way. And the Africa Continental Free Trade Area is a very good place to start. But then with the diaspora in North America, in South America, in the Caribbean, we have to again go back to maybe what was known at some point as trilateral thinking of how we work together to ensure that what is now known as the Global South becomes a key player, has the same voice as the Global North. It can't be otherwise, because the demographics today indicate that from 2050, we in the Global South will be the major players in the world. And therefore, depending upon what to do now, investment in education, investment in health, investment in pandemic preparedness, in energy transition, in inclusive economics, is what will make us a major player. Now, that has a lot of importance in terms of how the rest of the world interacts with us. I think if someone has said to any of us in this room in 1971, at the end of the Cultural Revolution in China, that China would be a major power it is today, some would have doubted it. But that country, because its demographic depth, its size, its ability to craft its own policies, is now a voice in the world. It's an economic superpower. And there's nothing they can do, we can't do. Because once we come together, once we mutualize our efforts, we define our own policies, whether it is from energy, education, health, pandemic preparedness, transformation, it can be done. At the end of the day, all nations on planet Earth were poor at some point. All of them. What made the difference was proper participation in global trade and capital markets. Now, during the days of imperial times, others were able to access global trade or global capital markets through brute force, through those asymmetrical forces where rich nations occupied weaker nations, where rich nations exploited poor nations. Has that fully been resolved? Not yet. It's simply that asymmetry of power has taken other forms. And this one I'm referring to about our ability to define our own policies and to work together. Advocate Mujanku, I don't know if I've been able to respond to your question, but in my view, those three are critical as we think about economic emancipation in these times. I want to thank you, and I'm happy to answer your question if there are any. Thank you, my sister.
Thank you so much. I think it was the clearest line of march that you could have given us, and it's very well understood. And I think that we are going to have an opportunity at the end of this plenary to debate that. I don't know how much time you are going to give us to debate that, and this will be just together with the two. There's a young man who's coming right after you, who's talking as a young person from Gambia about the challenges that they see as young people, that addresses the same issues that you've raised. And I don't know if you can stay with us for that session.
Mujanku, I'm very keen to hear this young person because the future is in their hands. And I'd hope to stay as much as I can to be able to be useful to this conversation. Over to you.
Thank you very much. I don't want to abuse the privilege I've been given to host this session, because I was going to ask you to comment just on leadership quickly to bring all of those together. What role does leadership play?
Advocates, I go back to Alexander the Great. I'm not sure that maybe that is a good example, but I want to go back to that. I'm not afraid of an army of lions led by a sheep. I'm afraid of an army of sheep led by a lion. This was said by Alexander the Great. It's not my statement. It says that leadership is everything. Leadership is everything. Now, we know the characteristics of leadership: ability to inspire, vision, values, to influence. These are taught in business schools and leadership schools. But we then must ask the second question: leadership for which people, for which epoch, for which times? And the kind of leadership we need for our times, for our epoch, for the kind of problems we need, has been in short supply. Has been short supply or fairly volatile. And that volatility has affected our ability to weigh in the world and also to change the lives of our people. I must add that in my understanding of leadership, there is one fundamental issue, and that is this. You must be able to have strong convictions and project those convictions in a manner which will make everyone galvanize around those convictions. You don't have to be in a position of authority or in a position of power. Advocate, you are from South Africa, so I'll refer to your own country. I think Nelson Mandela in Robben Island was not in a position of authority. To the contrary, being in prison is authority zero. But leadership he exercised was at its maximum. And so for me, leadership is not about occupying particular positions, whether in business, in politics, or international organizations. It's about which values you defend, how powerfully you project them, and galvanize people around those values, and walking the talk. Walking the talk. That has been in short supply. I hope this question is answered to your satisfaction.
Thank you very much. Before I get chased away as a facilitator, let me move quickly. So my younger brother from Gambia, who I welcome warmly, Usman Toure, I think you joined. I saw you earlier. I think I've been in a session where you participated in the past before. Yeah. Are you with us?
Yes, I am with you.
Yes, please proceed. The floor is yours. Your elder brother has spoken. We want to hear from you now.
Please, if the technicians can allow me to put my video on, or should I just move on with the voice?
I saw your face earlier.
Okay.
There you are. I can see.
Yeah, thank you so much. And that was a wonderful presentation from my uncle. I don't know, and I'm actually a neighbor because I am speaking from Kigali as well today. Yeah, so thank you very much, and I really welcome the idea and the presentation, especially on the side of the economy. When we look into Africa, we understand that we are in a context in which a lot has to be done in order to liberate ourselves financially, but also to set up paradigms for generations yet unborn. And when we look at the current realities today, few days ago, I was in Accra, Ghana, attending the Africa Private Sector Summit. And most of the things that we addressed was young people who needs platform to exhibit their talent, but to equally realize their full potentials in the continent. And one of the things that signals the possibilities of that is the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, which promises us on integration, but a one in which young people in Africa can integrate, trade among themselves, exchange ideas and skills, and to build something that is going to be productive and sustainable for generations of Africans. When we look back in the context, we will understand that today it is really difficult for trade within Africa, for travels within Africa. And we cannot have a sustainable economy if we do not break these barriers. If we look at a country like Kenya, for instance, whose yearly export is over $60 billion, but what do they trade with their own neighbors like Ethiopia, for instance? It's less than $1 billion. So there are some countries who are engaging in trade and are doing export and things like that in the continent, but who are we trading? It's usually doing business with people outside of the continent where it's basically very easy. It is resources from Africa that is going out, and then it will be transformed and come back to the continent in finished goods. So that is not the kind of economy that can sustain Africa and that can gain us genuine development, because the resources are limited no matter what. So there must be a transformational system, and this is why I keep on appealing in mostly the Africa's private sector leaders. We did mention a lot about the enabling environment. It is true that most governments in Africa are not doing what they are supposed to do. But what is the role of the private sector? Individuals must come in on board, genuinely investing in Africa in terms of transformational economics, building factories and industries, but at the same time serving as mentors for young people. There are youths that have met across the continent and with brilliant ideas, sound innovative, and doing inventions. A young lady's story in Kenya has been trending for the past days, who recycles, for instance, plastic and make building blocks out of it. So there are initiatives going on at the grassroots level which we must tap and bring these things on board. Get the private sector invest in these young people, mentor them, give them a platform, and that is how we can enable the integration. Because some countries are doing well, let's say in terms of their economic progress and growth, but the size of it is very small again. There must be a marketing ground, and that is what the Africa private sector promises us. So if we are able to do business, if we're able to do trade among ourselves, then other challenges that Africa face, we can even go to the extent of mitigating those problems. For instance, some people are hostile towards one another because they don't have a medium to trade with. If we are doing business today, we don't have to be enemies again because it's a win-win situation. So there are a lot of political issues that can be solved by just putting up an enabling environment to enable young people to realize their full potentials, but also to take up responsibility, because that is key. Young people must start taking up responsibility for the future of Africa. But we cannot do this if we don't have individuals at the top giving a helping hand, trying to hand up the baton, trying to provide the enabling environment. So this must be there. And another key thing is the leadership side of it. You see, today, if we go around the continent, most of the young people here no longer use African leaders, African entrepreneurs, or other individuals as reference. Because the issue is there's a lot of frustration in many African youths. And today we only blame those in charge. But who are these individuals that are genuinely there and wanting to take up responsibility, taking up the leadership positions, but at the same time, giving the young people the opportunity? And one of the reasons that some of the countries are moving is because one, there's good leadership, but also, you see, the vision of the leader and having a good leadership is just one thing. How do you put this vision in the minds and of young individuals to take up these visions, because they're the ones going to work today? Most of us are celebrating Rwanda. It's not President Paul Kagame who is fixing the road, but it is a vision that is communicated to the young people. And these are things that we must enhance. The private sector, the governments, the institutions, especially academic institutions, must be looked into. Universities, education centers must move from just teaching and learning to become solution centers where both the private sector, the government can go in to seek, for guidance, to seek for directions. These are possibilities and we can do it. So it means we just have to narrow the gaps from policy formulation, the private sector, people implementing on the ground, the young people providing them the platforms and giving them guidance, and at the same time bringing the academia on board, because scholarly work is important. We must understand the context of countries in order to develop something meaningful. And this is something that we can do by exploring what the private sector and institutions can do in promoting that. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that input. I think you're referring to the ecosystem that must be in place for young people to be able to take advantage of all these opportunities that are spoken about in the African
Okay,
continental
I'm on now.
trade agreement and all of that. So we're going to wrap it up with a short presentation from across the board, which presents a possibility. You know, Donald Usman is saying, how do we then take it forward? How do we do this? What's the most practical way of doing it? And I have online Mr. James Ferguson, who's a leading civil rights lawyer in the US. I can't read his CV, it's too long. He was at some stage voted as one of the top 10 lawyers in the US out of like 1.3 million lawyers, but has always worked in the civil rights area. And he's going to present a short 5-minute presentation on one of the practical ways that we can take this discussion forward. Because I can see in the chat, people are saying, Donald, you've raised very important points, and Usman, that we really need to take forward. You know, we can't just discuss them and then they end here. Unfortunately, you know, on Zoom, you can only be here for a short while. This session ends in the next 5 minutes and we move to another session. But let us hear just very quickly from Mr. Ferguson. Welcome, Mr. Ferguson, over to you.
Thank you so much, Advocate Gumbi. It is indeed an honor and a pleasure for me to have this opportunity to speak, though briefly, with the African diaspora. And I thank you and all others who put this conference together to move us on a pathway forward that we have been lacking for many, many centuries. I come to you to share with you a development that we are putting together here. We are trying to launch an app, a digital app, that will enable the African continent and the diaspora to link together digitally in an effort to connect, communicate, and collaborate throughout the diaspora on a project we're calling an economic justice platform. Our view is that the core of all of the problems that we have faced as people of African descent is that we have been enslaved and colonized, not just for a moment in history, but in a way that has lasted throughout the 6 or 7 centuries since the slave trade began with the transcontinental slave trade. The basis of that slave trade has always been the false concepts of white racism, of white superiority, and Black inferiority. And this is the false premise upon which the slave trade itself and colonialism also were premised. And these false premises were based upon every institution that we have in Western culture: government, civil society, business organization, the church itself, and every institution that has organized, directed, and controlled Western development, not to mention capitalism itself. And we have found historically that no matter what we do, this false concept of white superiority and Black inferiority have dominated in this society. And for that reason, we find that by every measure of life, and those things that we deem important to survival, we find that people of African descent come in at the bottom because they have never had an opportunity to meaningfully and fully participate in the development of Western culture, with everything ranging from our social and religious institutions to government itself and business and capitalism as well. So with this app that we are calling Economic Justice, we have identified several aspects of that development that we hope to access and make a difference in getting full participation of people of African descent in Western culture and throughout the African diaspora, which by now has proliferated in every corner of civilized society. So this app will bring us together socially, economically, governmentally, and in every aspect of the development of Western society. And through this means, we hope to be able to provide for the full participation of every aspect of the African diaspora, which has been so critically excluded from the development of Western society from the beginning. So the app will provide a way to connect businesses and economic development throughout the diaspora itself. We will have an aspect of the app that will address the issue of youth and mentorship, which we need to develop as a group. We will bring together asset allocators to provide the capital that we need. We will be able to bring members of the diaspora and Africa together to do business together. We hope to have a marketplace. We hope to be able to connect in every meaningful way, in a way that we've never been able to do. We're fortunate today that we have the technology to do that. And never before in our history have we been able to connect with each other since we were captured and dispersed throughout the universe. And until we address that basic issue of the African diaspora itself and the colonization of Africa, we will be limited in how we develop as a people. So we hope to overcome that huge handicap that has kept us back so far. There are several details that I wish I had time to share with you, but I think I've given you an overview of what we hope to do. It is our hope and purpose to try to launch this app sometimes by the middle of next year. And we invite all those who are part of this conference and all those who are part of the African diaspora and Africa itself to connect, communicate, and elaborate to eliminate the racism that has kept us back so far and allow us to develop as a people, bearing in mind that civilization itself started in Africa with African people. And we deserve, and the world deserves, to have that civilization revived and have that civilization go forward. I thank you for this opportunity to join you. I hope to come to you later and share with you the development and success of the platform I have just described. Thank you so much, Ms. Gumbi. Thank you so much, African diaspora.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ferguson. Thank you very much for that practical proposal that you've put before us. And that brings us to the end of this plenary. I think participants know that those who have participated in the conference before. As we leave here, I'm going to ask the organizers to put up the links. There are 2 parallel sessions that are going to run. This afternoon, there we are, the links to each one. All you have to do is just click on the link. There's a first breakaway. I mean, I'm looking at breakaway 2 now. What is the responsibility of Africans and African diaspora in forming a democratic and equitable international order? That's breakaway 2. I've got in my notes breakaway 1. Understanding Pan-Africanism within the digitalized world and the 4th industrial revolution. That's the first link, that one on top. So we'll see you in the link, in the breakaway rooms now. I'm talking 4th IR, so I'm thinking links all the time. Thank you so much, Donald. I don't know how to thank you, my brother. I will come back to you. Usman, I hope you can stay with us. But thank you so much. The rooms are ready. The facilitators are ready for you. The participants are ready to debate some of the issues that came up in this meeting. And I will be with you again when we come back to plenary. Thank you.